Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She looked right at me, rolled her eyes, and said, "Stop asking for intimacy like a teenager." Then she laughed, like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. That laugh cut deeper than anything she'd said before. It wasn't just rejection. It was dismissal, like I was some needy, immature man begging for attention he didn't deserve. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just nodded once, quietly, and went silent. That was the moment something in me shifted. It wasn't anger. It was realization. I'd been trying for months to connect, to bridge the distance between us. But she didn't want connection. She wanted control. So, I gave her what she'd earned. I gave her silence. For the next few days, I spoke less and less. No texts, no small talk, no good morning. She noticed it. At first, she pretended not to care, staying busy on her iPhone, scrolling Amazon and laughing at memes while sipping Starbucks on the couch. But I saw it. The way she'd glance up every few minutes, waiting for me to break the silence. I didn't. Every relationship has that invisible moment where power shifts. I felt it happen the night I stopped trying. She could sense it too. Suddenly, she was the one looking for validation. She started asking little questions. "Are you okay? Did I do something?" Her tone wasn't soft. It was uncertain. I answered only when necessary. My words were shorter, my eyes colder. One evening, she tried to bring back the old routine: wine, a movie, fake laughter. I stayed distant. When she leaned in to kiss me, I turned slightly, as if I hadn't noticed. That broke her rhythm completely. She pulled back, confused. For the first time, she didn't have control over the temperature of the room. That night, I slept facing away from her. No words, no gestures, just distance. By morning, she was pacing around the kitchen, pretending to look for something. She asked if I'd be home for dinner. I said, "Don't wait up." She froze, but I didn't explain. I grabbed my jacket, keys, and walked out. I didn't go to work. I drove. Miles of open road until the city lights faded. Parked my Ford F-150 at a quiet overlook, turned off my phone, and just sat there. Her laughter from the night before echoed in my head. It didn't sting anymore. It just sounded small. That's when I decided. If she thought I was acting like a teenager, I'd show her what teenagers do best. I'd vanish. And this time, she'd be the one left wondering. When I stopped responding, she didn't take it seriously at first. She thought I was sulking, that I'd cool off and come crawling back like always. I'd built that pattern for years. Argue, withdraw, return, repeat. But this time was different. I wasn't angry. I was gone. 3 days passed before she realized it. My phone was off, my location disabled, my social media wiped clean. She texted me 20 times that first night. "We need to talk." I didn't mean it like that. "You're being dramatic." By morning, her tone had changed. "I'm worried." "Where are you? Please answer." I didn't. While she was spinning, I was in control for the first time in months. I rented a small cabin outside the city, a quiet spot near a lake, the kind of place where you can hear yourself breathe. No notifications, no noise, just stillness. I woke up early, made coffee from a Walmart bag of cheap grounds, and watched the sunrise like a man watching his own rebirth. Every hour of silence I gave her, I could feel the balance shifting. She started calling my friends, my brother, even showing up at my office. No one knew where I was, and that made her panic. Because she'd built her confidence on the assumption that I'd never disappear, that I'd always be the one waiting for her moods to pass. Meanwhile, I started seeing things clearly. The jokes she made at my expense, the way she treated affection like a favor to be earned. I remembered how often she'd weaponized indifference, using it like a leash. I'd been conditioned to chase her approval without realizing how small I'd become in the process. The fourth night, she left a voicemail. Her voice was breaking. She said she missed me, that she couldn't sleep, that the house felt empty. I didn't play it twice. I just stared out the window, watching the lake move under the moonlight. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was peace. Cold, steady peace. The next morning, I got a message from a mutual friend. She'd shown up at my favorite diner, asking if anyone had seen me. She looked restless, tired, wearing that same confident mask, but it was cracking now. I smiled slightly. She once told me I was too emotional, too attached, too eager. But now she was the one haunted by silence. I hadn't blocked her. I just stopped existing in her world. And for someone like her, that was worse than any goodbye. By the 5th day, she wasn't just calling. She was begging. I could tell by the tone of her voicemails. No more sarcasm, no pride left. The woman who once rolled her eyes at me now sounded like she was unraveling. She said she didn't recognize herself anymore, that she just wanted to talk, to clear the air. I didn't answer. I wasn't cruel about it. I just didn't engage. Silence was no longer my punishment. It was my boundary. Back in the cabin, everything slowed down. The world felt clearer without her voice in it. I started running in the mornings, eating better, cleaning up my space. I hadn't realized how much of my energy went into managing her moods, her coldness, her constant need for control. Now, the air was clean again. My phone stayed dark, my mind even darker, focused, detached, unshaken. But the more I stayed quiet, the louder her panic grew. She started messaging from new numbers, pretending to be other people, trying to get a reaction. Then she shifted to guilt. "You're hurting me. This isn't fair." The same lines she used to keep me tethered before. But this time, I saw through every one of them. One evening, I stopped by a small Walmart to grab some supplies: coffee, a phone charger, a notebook. When I came out, I noticed her car parked across the street. She was sitting inside, staring straight ahead, hands gripping the steering wheel. She didn't see me. She looked exhausted, lost. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered that laugh. That cold, careless laugh when she mocked me for wanting something real. I walked past her car without stopping. That moment wasn't revenge, it was revelation. I realized she didn't expect me to actually disappear. She wanted control, not absence. She wanted me trapped in the cycle, orbiting around her mood swings forever. When she finally texted that night, it wasn't anger or apology. It was confusion. "Why are you doing this?" I stared at the message, and for the first time, I typed something back. "Because you told me to stop acting like a teenager." So I did. Then I turned the phone off again. That reply was short, but it hit harder than anything I could have said. Because it wasn't just silence anymore, it was clarity. And clarity, for her, was unbearable. The message I sent her didn't end things, it detonated them. The next morning, my phone lit up nonstop. Not angry messages this time. Desperate ones. She said she couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work. Said the silence was killing her. That she didn't understand how I could just walk away like that. But the truth was, she'd walked away first, months before I ever left. She just never expected me to follow her lead. I started seeing her unravel piece by piece through other people. A mutual friend mentioned she'd shown up at their place, crying, asking if I was seeing someone else. Another said she'd started showing up at my old gym, pretending it was coincidence. She was losing the performance, the control, the mask. The more she reached out, the more I pulled back. Out at the cabin, I made it a routine. Early runs, cold showers, breakfast from the small stash of groceries I'd grabbed at Walmart. Sometimes I'd drive out to the diner off Route 12, sit by the window, and just watch the world move without me in it. There was something cleansing about being unreachable, about knowing she couldn't find me even if she tried. A week passed before she finally showed up. I was outside stacking firewood when I heard tires crunching on gravel. Her silver Toyota Camry. She stepped out, looked around like she was seeing another planet. The confident woman who used to dominate every room now looked fragile, unsure of how to even approach. She said she'd been driving for hours, that she couldn't stand the silence anymore. I didn't answer right away. I just kept stacking wood, steady, deliberate. She said she missed me, that she didn't mean to hurt me, that she didn't think I'd actually leave. I told her quietly, "You didn't think I'd ever stop waiting." That hit her harder than shouting ever could. She started crying. Real tears this time, not the kind she used to soften me. She asked what I wanted her to do, how to fix this. I told her I didn't want anything from her, that I'd already fixed what was broken me. She stood there for a long time, staring at the ground. Then she got back in the car and drove off without another word. As I watched the dust trail fade, I realized something. She hadn't come to apologize. She'd come to see if she still had power. And when she looked in my eyes, she saw what scared her most. She didn't. After she drove away that day, I expected her to vanish for good. But people like her don't disappear, they circle. They linger in the spaces they once controlled, hoping to find a way back in. I knew it was only a matter of time before she tried again. What I didn't expect was how quickly the world would start showing her the cost of what she'd lost. It started small. A coworker told me later that she'd been breaking down at work, late arrivals, missed deadlines, emotional outbursts. Then, her friends began to distance themselves. The same group that used to laugh at my expense when she'd share pieces of our relationship over drinks at Olive Garden stopped answering her calls. People get uncomfortable around collapse, especially when it's public. Meanwhile, I was getting stronger. The silence that once felt heavy had become natural, even necessary. I'd stopped checking my phone entirely. Started journaling instead, pages of thoughts I never said aloud. I began running longer, eating cleaner, sleeping better. The man she used to criticize for being too emotional had become untouchable. One evening, while I was refueling my car at a small gas station, I saw her again. She was across the street, sitting alone in her car, staring straight ahead. No music, no movement, just stillness. The same stillness that used to belong to me. Our eyes met for a brief second. I gave her a small nod, nothing more, and got back in the truck. That quiet acknowledgement was enough to shake her. She wasn't used to being invisible. Later that night, I got one last message from her. I never thought you could be this cold. I read it twice, then deleted it. Because it wasn't coldness she was feeling, it was reflection. She was finally facing the version of herself she'd shown me all those months. The next morning, I went back to my routine. Coffee from Starbucks, a run by the lake, music low, mind calm. I didn't need revenge or validation. I'd already won in the simplest way possible, by no longer needing to prove anything. What she mistook for punishment was actually freedom. And as her world kept shrinking, mine kept expanding. That's when I realized the real power of silence. It doesn't destroy, it reveals. And now, everyone around her was starting to see what I'd known all along. The silence between us had stretched into weeks. She stopped calling eventually, but I knew that didn't mean she'd moved on. I could feel it. She was circling, watching, waiting for an opening. When you take power away from someone who lived off control, they don't just disappear. They linger, hoping for a crack in your calm. But mine didn't crack. It only deepened. I went back into the city for the first time in a month. Not for her, just life. I had things to do, places to be. I stopped at Walmart for a few essentials, picked up a new hoodie, some groceries, and a pack of her favorite coffee beans out of habit. I almost laughed when I caught myself holding it. Funny how long it takes to unlearn someone's presence. I put it back on the shelf. That afternoon, I grabbed lunch at a small diner where I used to meet her after work. The same corner booth, the same smell of burnt coffee and rain on the pavement. The waitress asked if I wanted the usual. I said not anymore. Halfway through my meal, I saw her. She walked in wearing that fake confidence like armor. Perfect hair, perfect smile, pretending she was fine. But her eyes gave her away the moment she saw me. They widened, then softened, then trembled. She walked over slowly, as if the air itself resisted her. She said she wasn't planning to come there. It was just coincidence. We both knew it wasn't. She asked if she could sit. I nodded once. She talked fast, trying to fill the silence. Said she'd been thinking about everything, about us, about how she handled things. I let her speak. Her words spilled out like confession, but I wasn't there to absolve her. She said she missed me, that she couldn't stop remembering the night I walked out, that every laugh she faked since then felt hollow. She wanted to know if there was still a chance. I looked at her for a long time, not with anger, but with distance. She waited for a reaction that never came. I told her calmly that I'd stopped living in the past she broke, that I was finally at peace, and she wasn't part of that peace. Her face fell, but she didn't argue. She just nodded, quietly, the same way I once did when she told me to grow up. Then she left, leaving her coffee half finished. And as the door closed behind her, I realized something. She had finally met the man she thought didn't exist, the one who could live without her. After that day at the diner, everything between us shifted again, but not how she wanted. She tried to stay present, texting occasionally, sending small reminders that she existed. Photos of sunsets, half-hearted jokes, a song link she said reminded her of us. I never replied. Not because I was cruel, because the silence had become my language now, and she was just beginning to understand what it meant. Over time, her messages grew longer, more emotional. She said she missed my voice, that she couldn't sleep, that she didn't recognize herself anymore. I could almost hear the confusion behind every word. She was chasing a man she'd already taught how to leave. I didn't block her. I let the messages come, unread, unanswered. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. One night, she called from a private number. I picked up, mostly out of curiosity. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. She said she knew she couldn't undo everything, but she just wanted to explain. That she never meant to break me down, that she thought I'd never actually go. I told her she didn't break me. She built the version of me that finally knew how to walk away. Then I hung up. The next morning, I drove out to the lake. The same one where I used to sit when I first left. The air was cold, quiet. I watched the water ripple under the wind and realized how different I felt. Stronger, lighter. Her absence wasn't an ache anymore. It was space. A week later, a friend mentioned she'd been seen crying at Olive Garden, sitting alone at the same table we used to share. Something about that image stayed with me, not out of pity, but perspective. She'd spent years teaching me that emotions were weakness, that caring too much made me small. Now, the same woman who mocked my vulnerability was drowning in her own. I never told anyone what really happened between us. There was no need. People can feel the truth in the silence that follows. She started losing people one by one, friends, coworkers, family. Not because of me, but because of how transparent her mask had become. That's when I realized I'd won something far greater than closure. I'd reclaimed my peace. And she? She was learning the same lesson she once laughed at me for trying to explain. What real intimacy costs when you treat it like a joke. Months went by before I saw her again. I was at a friend's birthday dinner downtown. Some small place with dim lights and loud laughter. I didn't expect her to be there. But when she walked in, everything in the room seemed to shift. She looked different. Not the confident version she always presented to the world. There was a quietness in her, something raw and unpolished. For a second, our eyes met, and I could tell she didn't know whether to smile or leave. She stayed, sat across the room, pretending not to notice me. But I could feel her watching every time I laughed, every time I spoke. She was studying a man she no longer knew, the one who'd stopped needing her. Later that night, as people began leaving, she walked over. Her voice was soft when she said she wasn't sure if she should have come. I told her she didn't need to explain herself. She hesitated, then said she missed who we used to be. I told her that person didn't exist anymore. The man she mocked had grown up in silence, and he wasn't coming back. She didn't argue. She just nodded slowly, biting her lip like she was holding back words that didn't matter anymore. Then she said something that almost sounded like truth, that she finally understood what intimacy really was. That it wasn't about control or power or games, it was about safety. And she'd never made me feel safe. For a moment, I saw the old her, the real one buried under the armor and pride. Vulnerable, human, but it didn't change anything. I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't open either. I'd spent too long rebuilding myself to let her pull me back into her storm. When she asked if I could ever forgive her, I said I already had. Forgiveness wasn't about her anymore. It was about freeing myself from the version of me who needed her approval. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "I wish I'd known that version of you." I looked at her calmly and said, "You could have, but you laughed." That was the last time I saw her cry. When she left that night, there was no drama, no final plea, just quiet acceptance. She finally understood what my silence had meant all along. It wasn't distance. It was transformation. And this time, she wasn't walking away from a man who needed her. She was walking away from the man who'd outgrown her. After that night, she stopped appearing in places I might be. It wasn't avoidance, it was surrender. I could feel it. The calls stopped, the messages disappeared, and the silence between us finally became mutual. But that's when her real collapse began. The version of her that once thrived on attention started fading in the same spaces that used to feed her. Mutual friends told me she barely spoke anymore. She'd show up at gatherings, sit quietly, smile when expected. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Her social media turned into a mirror of who she wished she still was. Old photos, fake captions, filters hiding exhaustion. People noticed. They always do. It's hard to fake confidence when your energy gives you away. I didn't take pleasure in any of it. Watching her unravel didn't bring joy, only perspective. I tried to give her connection, and she laughed. Now she was drowning in the same emptiness she once called independence. One evening, I went back to that diner, the same one from months before. Carol, the waitress, greeted me like usual, setting down a cup of black coffee before I even asked. The seat across from me was empty, but for some reason, it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. Peace has a way of filling silence when it's real. As I sat there, I thought about how everything had come full circle. She'd told me to stop asking for intimacy like a teenager, mocking my need for something deeper. And yet, in the end, it was her who couldn't handle distance. Because what she never understood was that intimacy isn't about touching someone. It's about being known by them. And when I stopped asking to be known, she finally realized what she'd lost. Later that night, I got one last message from her. It wasn't long, just a few words. I hope you're happy. For a moment, I stared at it. The old me would have tried to soften it, to reassure her. But the man I'd become didn't need to. I replied, I am. No anger. No drama. Just truth. That was the final message we ever exchanged. And as I set my phone down, I realized something. Her laughter that night had been the start of my freedom. Because when someone mocks your depth, it's not a reflection of your weakness. It's proof they've never learned how to swim. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive with a sound. It just shows up one morning, quiet and complete. Months had passed since I'd last heard from her. The noise was gone. The games, the questions, the confusion, all of it had faded. My life had become simple again. Coffee at sunrise. Work without distraction. Evenings spent reading instead of explaining myself to someone who never listened. I wasn't running anymore. I'd stopped chasing the version of love that demanded I shrink to fit inside it. But peace has a way of testing you, even after you think you've won. One afternoon, I was parked outside a grocery store, scrolling through messages, when I saw her walking across the lot. She looked different, slower, quieter, as if the world had finally caught up to her. When she noticed me, she froze. For a moment, it felt like time folded in on itself, pulling all our history into that single look. Then she walked over. She said she wasn't here to talk about the past. She just wanted to thank me, that the silence had forced her to face herself, that for the first time, she'd stopped performing and started feeling. Her words didn't sound like manipulation anymore. They sounded like truth. She said she understood now, that intimacy wasn't something to laugh at or control. It was something to protect. I nodded, letting her speak. Then I told her I didn't hate her. I never did. I told her that all of this, the pain, the distance, the quiet, had turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to either of us. Because sometimes people have to lose everything fake before they can find something real. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both regret and acceptance. She said she was finally learning to be alone without feeling lonely. And for the first time, I believed her. Before she left, she asked if I'd ever think about her again. I said I probably would, but not the way she feared. I'd think about her the way you remember a lesson that changed you. Something painful, but necessary. She nodded, whispered goodbye, and walked away. No tears, no drama, just silence. The same silence that once divided us now felt like peace between two people who finally understood. As she drove off, I realized I didn't feel empty. I felt complete. She had laughed when I asked for intimacy. But in the end, my silence had taught her what real closeness costs and what it's truly worth. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.